Prologue.
Adding a good 2 cents right from the get-go, because this book does not have a contents page. The book is also split up into parts, where the chapter count resets every 10 to 15 chapters. This means that the reader needs to remember the part number, chapter number, and spend a good amount of time flicking through the book every time the bookmark slips out. And believe me, it happens a lot more times than you'd think.
Is Damum misa est, quis nobilitas miserius nobilitat.
Sure, start the book off with a quote, and in Latin no less, a language that 0% of your readers will understand. And no, having the English version right below does not make it any less pretentious.
That Robin realised, for the first time, what kind of business she had been sent to assist. Nobody at the agency had said.
What kind of agency sends a person to do a job without telling them where they'll be working? And why would anybody accept a job without knowing anything about it?
Strike deduced that he had saved her by grabbing a substantial part of her left breast.
2 main characters of the opposite gender accidentally running into each other and leading into an inappropriate moment cliché. Wait a minute, this isn't an anime?
Could I offer you gentlemen some tea or coffee? Asked Robin.
You just got here, Robin. How do you even know that the office has any tea or coffee?
Robin laid out 2 cups, none of which Strike had ever seen before.
Huh, never mind. I suppose you used the summoning charm. Is this the Strike to Potter connection that we've been looking for?
Cleared on the evidence of his drug dealer, wasn't he?
Why would any court agree to take testimony or evidence provided by an illegal drug dealer?
Where did the cups and the tray come from? The coffee and biscuits? I borrowed them all from Mr. Crowdy.
But how did Robin leave the office and come back with refreshments without Alison noticing? She was sitting right outside.
I thought, having offered the client coffee, we ought to provide it.
Genius. Though a better idea would have been to check if the office actually had any before offering.
The designer, Guy Sommet, was quick to inform the press that she jumped wearing one of his dresses, which sold out in the 24 hours after her death.
Seriously? I don't know much about the fashion industry, but wouldn't that have the reverse effect? I can't see how anybody would want to wear the clothes somebody just died in, even if they were a mega popular superstar.
Bristow's fixated on the quarter of an hour after his sister went inside, after the photographers had left and the security guard had abandoned the desk because he was ill.
Wouldn't a rich apartment complex that can afford to hire security guards around the clock also have something as basic as CCTV cameras inside the building?
He's sleeping in his office, Robin. Don't you think there's something a bit fishy there?
Considering the exorbitant high charges of London rent, and the fact that he was the only one working there until Robin unexpectedly showed up, no, not really.
Strike lifted the 4 boxes down the steps onto the pavement and waited to hail a black cab.
This book may be 45 chapters long, but the last few chapters have been ridiculously short. This one was barely above 2 pages and only a 5-minute read, making it really difficult to stay invested with the constant change in scenes.
However efficient she had been at taking messages,
there are 5 howevers in this paragraph alone, and that's 4 times too many for a single paragraph. Not to mention that the writing is all about Robin complaining about it being her last day, when she clearly knows that Strike can't afford to hire so much as an intern.
She typed in the 2 names. Rokeby Strike.
Well, one name, since people don't usually refer to their surname as a separate name.
We could come to a private arrangement. We could cut out temporary solutions and you could pay me directly. He hesitated.
Wait, so Strike can afford to keep paying her? I know he got a lump sum from Bristow, but doesn't he have a bunch of debts to pay off too?
Where's the car?
There's no spaces between where's and a. Also, shouldn't it be where's the car?
His homelessness.
You still have your office, which you happen to be using as a home, so technically you're not homeless yet.
And a massive debt.
Yet you can still somehow afford to hire Robin.
Lula love Guy like a brother.
Guy's name is not capitalized in this sentence, while Lula's is.
And try and find a number for a bloke called Guy Sumet. He's a designer. It's pronounced Guy.
And Strike should already know this, considering he's been mentioned about 10 times before now.
What are you after, then?
A few seconds ago, Wardle was accusing Strike of lying about his tip-off, which is a reasonable accusation considering he didn't have any proof. But now he suddenly decides to take Strike's word for it and spill the beans, without doing anything to confirm his words.
There wasn't any unexplained DNA in her flat.
But you just said it was freezing that night, and everybody was wrapped in thick clothing from head to toe. That means that there wouldn't have been any DNA, even if somebody was there.
A gym on the ground floor behind the security desk.
This apartment complex has a gym, a pool, and an underground parking lot, yet they still couldn't afford a CCTV in the lobby.
He was on his knees, searching through one of the cardboard boxes he had brought from Charlotte's flat.
How can Strike be on his knees with a prosthetic leg without it causing him extreme discomfort?
So you had a connection with Lula Landry then, Mrs. Bestigui?
Inconsistent narration.
The file arrived 3 hours later, while he was eating fish and chips out of a small polystyrene tray in his lap and watching the London Evening News on his portable television.
This is probably the most on-the-nose British thing ever written in the history of fiction.
Another child fell over, crashing its head onto the cricket stump.
This is the third fallen child since Strike arrived 5 minutes ago. The adults who came up with whatever game they're playing is doing a horrible job of supervising it.
They asked for me, said Robin. They obviously suspect I'm still here.
How? Does Temporary Solutions really have nothing better to do than stalk the offices of their clients?
To prove, to solve, to catch, to protect. These were things worth doing, important and fascinating.
Then why not find a job in the police force or detective agency instead of the HR office jobs that you've been applying to? Strike might not be able to afford keeping you, but there are plenty of other agencies that you could be applying for. I mean, you came about working for Strike without even trying, so it can't be that hard.
Have you spoken to Reuben? Landry asked Bristow coldly.
Wasn't Landry just saying in the last chapter about how discussing client information is confidential? And now here he is, talking about another client right in front of Strike.
So, I rang up the hospital yesterday evening pretending to be her, and I said I'd forgotten the time of my appointment, and they told me it's at 10:30 on Thursday morning.
Don't hospitals need the patient to confirm something about themselves, like an address or the date of birth, before giving out sensitive information like that? Also, fraud.
He was sure that if he took out his notebook, she would clam up or leave.
Well, you could record the conversation in secret on your phone, like how you did just a few chapters ago.
Rochelle did not think she was in danger. She thought she was safe.
Could this red death flag be any more obvious?
And I slipped, said Wilson. He sounded shocked. I forgot that.
How can you remember every other detail of what you did in Lula's room, but forget slipping down the stairs, something that would be memorable by the pain alone?
He had no money and his driver had disappeared, so he just hiked across London so he could crash at mine.
But isn't Duffield supposed to be a superstar? Even in the unlikely event that he didn't have any money on him, he surely had a phone to call for another private taxi.
You were taking a lot of drugs at the time, weren't you?
Inconsistent narration.
Hadn't it crossed his insensitive, obtuse accountant's mind that she might be dreading the tedious bloody job in human resources?
Again, if Robin doesn't want the job in HR, then why did she apply for it? There must be plenty of other well-paying jobs at detective offices that she could be applying to.
Well, I went in there and pretended I was writing a dissertation on African politics.
Man, I wonder how many times Robin has admitted to fraud so far. This has got to be the third or fourth time at least. I know they're private detectives, but half the testimony and evidence they found wouldn't be viable in a court of law.
She said he was so clever, the nicest, kindest man.
Inconsistent narration.
The body of Rochelle Onifade was revealed.
And I might have been surprised if the author hadn't made it plainly obvious that she was going to die.
Suicides don't usually pack a bag to jump.
How did Carver come to the conclusion of suicide when the body was only just found? She hasn't even been examined by a specialist yet.
She was blackmailing Lula Landry's killer.
Isn't it just as, if not more likely, for the killer to be blackmailing or bribing the homeless girl to keep quiet?
Surveillance doesn't fall within the scope of secretarial duties.
And committing multiple acts of fraud by pretending to be somebody else does?
You're putting yourself in the clear for the actual murder.
But everybody apart from Strike still thinks that Lula's death was a suicide. And even if they don't, it's not like Strike has any incriminating evidence linking Bastigui to the murder. The only thing Strike has is circumstantial evidence that Bastigui locked his wife out in the snow.
He handed her pills and the cup. Her hands trembled.
Shouldn't Strike be asking the nurse before giving Lady Bristow any medication? I know she asked for it, but it's also clear that she has some sort of memory disorder.
Hidden under the lining of the white bag was a will, handwritten by Lula on your mother's blue notepaper and witnessed by Rochelle Onifade. I've given it to the police.
But would the will even stand up in court, since it was taken illegally and without a warrant?
You killed your sister, got away with it, and then asked me to reinvestigate her death.
Investigate her going through the entire murder in front of the killer, while the killer just sits there and listens, cliché.
I expect the idea of the murder started to germinate then. All those hours you were alone, in all that luxury.
Question. Why was Bristow waiting alone in the empty flat for so long if he didn't initially plan on killing Lula?
I was going to ask you whether you looked into my personal life when you were trying to find some patsy to manipulate.
Manipulate for what? Lula's death was already classified as a suicide. There was absolutely no reason for Bristow to hire a private detective and dig his own grave the way he did.
You saw another man running for his life, away from the corner where he'd just seen his sister fall to her death.
Why would Agiman run instead of going to the police? His sister had just died, and it's not like he had anything to do with the murder.
Where your luck caught up with you again, and there were no more cameras.
Seriously, so much of this murder plot relies on luck, convenience, and people forgetting things at the most inopportune of moments.
And that's why she kept trying to call her uncle and find out whether there was any truth in the story.
Okay, I understand why Lula was trying to call her uncle, but why did she keep calling Duffield?
But the police found Rochelle's mobile phone in his mother's safe. He didn't dare get rid of it.
Why not? It's not that hard to destroy a mobile phone.